States with the eyes of foreigners. And I do that for two reasons. One, I grew up overseas. I grew up in Latin America. My father was an American businessman, and I lived in 7 countries as a boy. So throughout the 1960s and 1970s, certainly turbulent times, I was looking at the United States often through the prism of those in the countries, through the prism of the countries in which I lived. Today, I help run an international consulting firm that helps companies deal with government issues in places as diverse as Brazil, India, China, Russia, Philippines, you name it, and deal with a lot of foreign diplomats and business people who are dealing with the United States. We're having a debate in this country, in part because it's a political year, we can't help but acknowledge that, about whether the United States is an exceptional country. And I've always thought that that was a bit of an errant debate, because of course we're exceptional. And yet, the way that that sounds to foreign ears can be perhaps arrogant, perhaps be viewed as very self-serving. As you think about how to present the United States to the rest of the world, how do you achieve that balance of making sure that we are an exceptional nation, but we're not going to beat you over the head with it?
For me, it's a little bit simpler in that I don't like to tell people we're an exceptional nation, but I tell them we do exceptional things. And I think we're in an age where we're all in a fiscally constrained era. It's show me. Show me what you do that makes a difference on the ground in somebody's life. Show me the Fulbright Program. Show me the training that you do with journalists. Give me a sense of where you've built something, created something that is going to make a positive difference. So I think we're in a post-rhetoric era where we've had a lot of speeches, we've said a lot of things, and now we have to demonstrate what it is we do overseas, and people can see, touch, feel, appreciate. Questions?
If I may ask the second one real quick. You mentioned about public diplomacy, educating foreign publics about the United States. And a lot of us in the public diplomacy field understand the importance of listening. And I wanted to see if you had any comments on how to use that, not only to educate foreign public, but to educate ourselves about foreign publics so that we can actually truly understand them and make informed policy decisions based on them.
Well, we do need to build a national constituency for globalized everything. We do have to demonstrate that being engaged in the world is vital and important, whether you're in the middle of the country or here in Washington. So that's an onus on every public servant now, is to make the case. In terms of overseas and here, yesterday I had the opportunity to do a global Twitter Q&A in 9 languages. I had no idea what I would be walking into. It was a room full of translators and public affairs folks at computer terminals with large screens. It looked like something out of Star Wars of the future. And questions just kept rolling in. You have, as you know, 140 or fewer characters with which to answer complex issues. But I watched as all parts of the world engaged in this dialogue. I was listening to questions from Pakistan, from China, from Europe. And so it's all moving in a multi-directional circle. And you just have to pull up your chair into the circle and join in the conversation.
Yeah, my question is... Yeah, of course. My name is Brooklyn. I'm here from the National Council of International Visitors. And so my question is, what role do you see citizen diplomacy playing within your vision for the public diplomacy in Canada?
Well, firstly, I see myself as a cheerleader for citizen diplomacy. In September, I will be going to Des Moines, to the center of citizen diplomacy, and also speaking at Drake University, where they're holding a conference on citizen diplomacy. What it's about is the role of individuals in contributing to the global community. And so for anyone who believes in public service, international service, civic engagement, this is the space. And this is a place where people do vibrant things. And so I guess that says it all. I will be out there in September rallying for those people who go overseas and do great things.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Melinda Herring. I'm an adjunct at ASP. What do you do with the very difficult countries like Turkey, where anti-Americanism is so high, or Pakistan?
I had the good fortune of meeting last week with our U.S. ambassador in Turkey, who was in town. Great public servant. And we talked a lot about this. And one of the important things to do is to come out and see what's happening on the ground, visit with people, go to high schools and colleges, try to take the temperature, figure out what it is that's driving the anti-sentiment, and try to get in and do something about it. And we both agreed that there's just nothing like being there, and I think that's a case where I'll just need to go out and figure it out.
Go ahead, over here.
Hi, my name is Craig Hayden. I'm from the School of International Service at American University. I had a big picture question about PD strategy, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how U.S. public diplomacy may be moving towards a strategy of facilitation and convening as opposed to messaging and image furnishment, and kind of follow up on how you interpret that.
I think there's an intersection where it's not an and or it's a both. And I think facilitating, convening, the State Department has enormous convening power. There's just, you call a meeting, people come, you show up in a country, people care, they're interested. So you can never discount just the pure value of facilitation. But I think once you facilitate and you convene, you have to explain and define. So they really go hand in hand, and they're part of a continuum of efforts around engagement. It's a good question.
Go ahead.
In the past, the public diplomacy of the United States has been criticized.
Identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry, I'm Cesar Jimenez. I'm a PhD student at the London School of Economics. And in the past, the public diplomacy of the United States has been criticized because it's been said it hasn't looked for dialogue, but it has been actually imposed values under the banner of the universal. So I was wondering, how do you deal with that in order that when you talk to foreign publics, you don't seem that you are imposing something, but you're actually in a conversation?
Well, a good example of that is on the trip to Pakistan. I spoke at a women's college, Kinnaird College, and they were all ready for me to just give a long speech and preach and teach and dictate and leave. And of course, I had a very short set of remarks, and then it was time to engage. And firstly, I think from the very beginning, you have to set the tone. I'm not here to give you a sermon. I'm here to be part of the circle and to use that imagery that we've moved now from the triangle of the old days with elites on top and the grassroots on the bottom. Then we flipped it over, and the grassroots seemed to be driving everything, and the elites. And now we're just in a geometric circle. So there is no choice but to be in a circular conversation. It doesn't lend itself, actually, to the other. But what was interesting in the Pakistan situation was some of the young people got up and they asked tough questions. I mean, they were ready to grill me. And I thought, well, I'm ready, I'm prepared, have at it. And at the end of this kind of difficult encounter, they lined up to ask how to get to American schools. So, that schizophrenia that is in every nation, which is, I want to tell you how mad I am about something, and then how glad I am if I can have the opportunity to be with you and be mad at you with you. That is the sentiment in many places, and you have to just go with that flow.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Alexander Vag. I'm a research assistant at Georgetown University for Local Center on the U.S. Foreign Service. I was wondering if you could sort of give your views on what exactly diplomacy is in 2012 and whether you saw it as mainly the responsibility of foreign service officers who specialize in public diplomacy, if you feel it should be part of all government officials' sort of ideology?
Well, I just had a town meeting with what we call the R family. Don't ask me why R is what public diplomacy at state is called. I'm going to pretend it's the R in Edward R. Murrow or something. But the R family consists of foreign service officers, civil service, Schedule C. There's all kinds of different folks with training in digital libraries, in financial, economic statecraft. So I begin from the premise that we can't have siloed answers to who can do public diplomacy. What we can do is make sure public diplomacy is woven into the whole fabric of the foreign policy. So everything that is coming out of foreign policy, it's like the old public affairs communications problem where we were always the last item on the agenda. So you figure out the whole trip and what's going to happen and what's going to be rolled out and what are the deliverables, and then, 2 minutes to the end of the hour, what's our public affairs strategy? That's changing. It's now interwoven into the conversation. So that says to me that we can't get into these stovepipes again. But certainly there are people training, getting a master's in public diplomacy, writing about it. So it's a real field. We have to begin to treat it as a professional field.
Yes, right here. You.
My name is Amy, and I'm here with the International Visitors. My question is about compete of other countries, like China, Russia. Like they have very ambitious peace strategy. How do you comment on that?
So those who know me know I have followed Chinese public diplomacy for about 10 years. When I first began to see it creep into the dialogue of Chinese speeches in 2004, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. And so I began to kind of chart where it was going, and it has gotten very sophisticated, very nuanced. And the same with Russian public diplomacy, although a different approach. But how many of you have opened a Washington Post on a Saturday or Sunday and seen a Chinese supplement? You're thinking, did I order that? How'd that get in there? It's public diplomacy. How many of you seen a bus go by with an ad for a China ballet at the Kennedy Center or something? It's public diplomacy. So I've seen it. I don't think we should be afraid or skeptical or critical. We should be challenged. We should up our game and see this as, okay, we're going to have to get really, really good at this because others are practicing it.
Yes, sir, over here.
Hi, I'm with Sisters Seas International. You mentioned that youth was one of your priorities, and obviously reaching out to youth abroad is a big part of that, but it seems like it's never been hard to actually bring young people to the U.S. To do a lot of critical areas of the world, almost all of Africa. We had a program assistant of ours, denied a visa to point blank because she's unmarried and childless, she can't come. How can we expect to reach out to youth if we can't even invite them and bring them to the program?
A couple of answers to that. Last week I spoke to the young entrepreneurs from Africa who came here, the most inspired group of young people from the continent that I have ever seen. And I asked them how long this has been going on, and it's quite recent. So one is, I think things are changing in the last few months. I see a lot more of young people coming from overseas. The visa issue is an issue, but I think that's going to be changing too. I think the wait time for visas, the whole system with Brazil, enormous progress has been made getting down to what we call single-digit day time for waiting for visas. The international numbers of international students here, just, I'm shocked at how little we know about how many are actually here on short-term programs and longer-term programs. I also asked the other day, do we know, just curiosity, how much international students who are here for a year contribute to the U.S. economy? Just in case somebody on Capitol Hill would wonder why we are bringing so many students here. The answer is that in 2011, international students generated $20 billion. So yes, I'd like to see more. We also have pressures to be sending more overseas. We're a big receiving country from China, for example, Brazil, other places, but now, interestingly, the U.S.-India delegation said last week, we really want your students to start coming to India. So we need two-way streets, and I'm all for big numbers and study abroad, both directions.
Yes.
My name is Magdalena Lubiska, and I'm here as a Fulbright visiting fellow. So I guess I am part of the Europe Public Diplomacy Program.
Yes, you most certainly are.
And I have a question, because there's so much talk recently about the need, the importance of networks in this highly complex world. And I was wondering if in your strategy, in your field, if you have any concrete examples of doing something together, for example, with European counterparts, to strengthen and to show that that's how it should be done.
First, congratulations on being a Fulbright. It is just an extraordinary program. I'll be going this afternoon to see off the Fulbrighters going to China. And I think our country doesn't even realize how robust and what the Fulbright program has delivered. Nobel laureates, presidents of countries, I don't want to put pressure on you. Fulbrighters have done amazing things. It's a 66-year-old program, and it's really wonderful. In terms of networks, what I told not the African youth entrepreneurs, the African women entrepreneurs, separate group, separate even from the AGOA group. So last week there were 3 African delegations here. Hard to get that in the news, but here's a great example of in 1 week, 3 major delegations from the continent. And I told them that they needed 3 C's. These were African women trying to figure out their way to scale up businesses and education. I said, you need connections, you need communications, and you need confidence. And on the connections, they said, well, what do you mean by connecting and convening and coordinating, all these words? I said, everywhere you go, pick up an email address. You go home to your country and you email someone who is interested to you, someone who might buy your product, might have a tip for you. We have to take advantage of the connectivity, but it still requires a human being to ask for a card, to go home, to send an email, to connect, to offer your services, to volunteer, to contribute. So there's no getting away from the human endeavor, but you have to take advantage of the connectivity. I hope that answers it.
Yes.
Susanna Groves from the Migration Policy Institute. What role do you see for diaspora communities in the U.S.'s public engagement strategy?
This is an interesting and yet sensitive question, interestingly, because we have this thing called Smith-Mundt. For those of you who don't follow it, the Smith-Mundt piece of legislation does not allow us to, Matthew, I'm going to make you define this.
Materials that are produced for overseas dissemination aren't allowed to be disseminated within the United States. So what we produce to talk to foreign publics, we can't look at ourselves.
Now, I raised that because obviously in an internet age, that's kind of tough. The second thing is in a diaspora engagement strategy. Last time I looked, the overseas people with roots overseas and heritage communities are here in the United States. So I decided it doesn't apply to me personally as an Under Secretary, but if I become the first person to violate Smith-Mundt, I'll call all of you for help. The diaspora engagement that I legitimately can do is important, and there's a July diaspora conference that the Secretary of State hosts every year, and I think it is so critical that we reach out to people from other countries even if they've made their whole life and living in the United States, they care deeply and passionately about where they came from.
Yes, in the front row.
I want to ask about public policy. Rosemary Reed, the Historical Society. Public policy in Cuba. I was just there in January, and I was wondering what kind of updates or changes are you working on?
So Nelson will be happy that my first trip domestically was to Miami. And it was for a Broadcasting Board of Governors board meeting. One of the perks of the job is I get to represent the secretary on the BBG board, which oversees Radio Marti's, Voice of America, RFE, RFL, all of these entities. So this meeting happened to be at the Office of Cuba Broadcasting. So I got a full tutorial. Without dragging you through the long Cuba story, I'd say what I came away thinking is the most effective public diplomacy tool right now vis-a-vis Cuba is SMS texting. And it was absolutely fascinating to me that they were reaching people on the island with SMS texts. As you know, the travel restrictions have shifted, groups do come and go, but this is still a very contentious public policy issue. But I was happy to see what is being done to reach ordinary citizens.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Jeff Weiner. I'm the government relations firm M Capital Management, and I wanted to tie in two things I've heard about working with the diasporas as well as international visitors. I have a doctor, a physical therapist who is an Egyptian American, very much pro-brotherhood, very much pro-U.S., and actually runs a healthcare NGO back in Egypt. He said to me that we were talking about the election the other day, and he said, how can I bring people that I treat in Egypt, and some of the poorest communities in Egypt that we fear in the wrong hands can turn into sophists instead of pushing for a better Egypt. He said, I know how we get the best and brightest and those with the means and visitor programs to the U.S., but how do we get these people, these young people I'm treating by NGO? Do you have any sense of?
I do, because I asked a very similar question when I came in, and I was proud to discover that there's a real effort underway for public diplomacy to underserved communities. And I said, well, show me, give me an example. I want to see something of this. And Brazil was the first example. The president of Brazil came, and I was invited to the Education Engagement Dialogue, and there were representatives of HBUCs, historically black university colleges, that were signing MOUs with people from provincial areas. So these were Brazilian governors and mayors from underprivileged Afro-Brazilian communities signing MOUs with historically black colleges. And I thought, okay, that's real. So that means that we ought to be able to move out to rural areas on both sides of this engagement traffic. It's going to take work. It is not easy. It's not the obvious Fulbright candidate. It's going to come from an underserved community. But I think we can push the envelopes here. And as I said, I was very curious about the exact same subject, diversity, widening the base of the international exchange pyramid.
Yes, all the way in the back.
Thank you, Under Secretary. I would like to come back to the second question about educating our leaders, American leaders, about foreign countries and foreign governments, and also educating foreign leaders about the American system. What are your thoughts on the future and the resources in the context of the budget limits that you mentioned for the international visitors programs, in particular those on legislative training? We are bringing Romanian parliamentarian staffers to the United States for internship in the US Congress. And I've looked at existing programs. In fact, there is quite a success on congressional exchange programs. They are usually run by foundations like the Lantos Foundations, for instance, or with the help of think tanks like the German Marshall Fund. And I wonder what's the role of your office or your thoughts or the resources or the connection. We are quite early in the process, and I've just had a meeting with congressmen from the congressmen and women from the Romanian caucus, and so we are looking at what's the role of state and public diplomacy could be.
It's an excellent point. The question is really about all of these exchanges that happen parliament to parliament, doctors to doctors. Sort of what's the role of State Department and specifically the resource allocation issues of funding. So the important thing to know in short is that within public diplomacy, or this R family, there's the ECA side of it, which is the Education and Cultural Affairs end, and they have their own congressional appropriation that is direct to ECA. They're their own line item. Then there are the other aspects of public diplomacy, which form the other side of the funding, also from the congressional budget and our taxpayers, but not in that group. What's interesting is that the exchange program sector is so grown that where there used to be Fulbrights, a couple of others, people remember the au pair program, there are now about 140 different programs. So it has really proliferated. The role of state is we have grantees, which are many of the organizations, nonprofits, civil society groups that actually do set up the exchanges and seek funds from ECA. So it is very complicated, and it is something I'm still navigating, but that's the short answer. So tell your members of Congress should love education exchanges.
Yes, sir. Derek Bolton, American Security Project. I actually had spent quite a bit of time in Europe. I did my undergrad in Ireland, my graduate studies in the Netherlands. So, I've sort of been exposed to how people in Europe, our traditional allies, have actually viewed our actions recently. And one of the things that I came across is, there is such they see our rhetoric as simply rhetoric, and that our actions are so different. I mean, in Ireland especially, they were very upset about Shannon Airport being used. And obviously we need to use that from a logistical standpoint. So, I feel like there's always going to be this separation to some extent between our national security needs, and many of our needs, and what we say, and what, our rhetoric. And, you touched on that, saying, well, we need tangible, results that they can see. And I was just wondering, what were some of, the ideas that you guys are working on? Because that was one of the big things that I kept saying is everything that we say, and even the things that we were doing that were, necessarily too better. They were so skeptical. In the Netherlands, they were like, oh, well, America's not doing that for the interest. It's because of an XYZ, almost these conspiracy theories.
Well, one way to break it down is we used to do things on our own a lot. And my approach now, and I think everybody in a constrained environment is looking for partnerships and collaboration and points of convergence. So yesterday, the Under Secretary for what's called the J family, please don't ask me why it's J, not R, but it oversees all of the human rights, democracy, labor, security, human security issues, invited me to co-host a lunch with her for European ambassadors, Asian, there were many different continents represented there, overseas ambassadors to Washington. And we sat around and talked about, with the British there, which was very interesting because there was in the old days some rivalry between the British Council, which does its exchanges, and ECA and Alliance France. So a lot of this comes from this kind of, that's ours and we own it. But we sat around together talking about what could we do in trilateral, bilateral, multilateral ways. And you could feel something new in the air. Need is an amazing motivator when everybody is in need. It's amazing how they will gather around one table and say, what can we do in Ireland, in Britain, in Brazil, around youth issues. So I think some of it may come just from the pragmatic, practical realities of how we partner.
I'm Shanna Weeds. I'm with Women's Actions for New Directions. And I was just wondering, what do you see as the role for public
diplomacy in the recent regime changes in the Middle East?
Well, the first, since you're interested in gender issues, is to unlock the potential of women and girls out of Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen, I hope someday Syria, Libya. The economic and political power of women and girls, if fully unleashed and unlocked, can be so transformative. So that's one role. The youth bulges are real in some of these countries. It's 65% people under 35. So we're going to have to really empower the youth sector. I see public diplomacy as helping to reach out to these young entrepreneurs. We're looking now for how to do things. In Libya for 40 years, you could not really practice an entrepreneurial, small or medium-sized company or investment. The education system, it's textbooks that are based on a green book that is 4 decades out of date. So there's a lot of work in transitioning democracies. I think public diplomacy can play a role in outreach to citizens, upscaling educational programs, building exchanges, sharing best practices, convening. To me, there are endless possibilities.
Just
one more?
Yeah, one more in the front row here.
Hi, I'm Daniela Derry from Picture Media. I'm just wondering, we talked a lot about how public diplomacy can engage and target new audiences, but what do you think are the challenges of keeping your alumni, people who have already participated, engaged? And a lot of people say that this is the biggest asset for the United States, because they can amplify the message of what they've learned and really spread throughout their communities.
You are so right. The alumni network potential has just been underutilized, frankly. 66 years of Fulbright alumni. I think we've got to now find them. I looked last night, the first woman Fulbrighter, there's a video of her. She was her major was home economics, she should tell us. But there she is in a video that somebody did. She was the first woman Fulbrighter in 1948. We've got to build these databases. It's labor intensive, it's hard, people move, they change addresses. I don't minimize what it's going to take to build these alumni networks, but I can tell you it's underway in a big way, because from the day I arrived, it was about alumni networks for all these 140 programs and resources that are going to be needed to get these all in one place, post by post, embassy by embassy, country by country. Where are they? What are they doing? And how do you utilize them as a powerful engine for these programs? So very much on the agenda.
I'd like to make a quick comment, and I'm going to turn back to Nelson for a moment. I attended an event last night put on by 2 other nonprofits that discussed foreign policy, and I don't think there was a single person in the room that was under 60 years old, and those that were there were predominantly male. And I mention this to the audience here today because I'm so impressed that you're here. Your questions were superb, and I think the future of our country and public diplomacy rests with the youth, and that's everybody that's in here. So from the ASP perspective, we're excited that you're here, we're happy that you're here, and I'm very, very, very pleased. And I also think it's a testament to you, Tara, that they're all here and they look up to you, and we were way oversubscribed for this event, and ASP is expanding its portfolio, so please go on our website, see what we're doing, please come to our events, and I want you to know that I'm very appreciative. Let me turn it over to Nelson.
Tara's always been a personal role model for me. I can see looking out of the eyes, especially of some of the younger women in the room, that you've got a new role model yourselves. Thanks, Tara, for coming and doing this and for sharing this with you, and good luck on all your travels. And with that, Smith, my friend.